Hi, Lenny.
Hi. Was on mute.
Yeah, no worries. All right, here we go. So, how did you like the game?
It was good. It was interesting.
Yeah, what did you notice about it?
I thought the scoring, England's pattern when they scored with the like pod picks and then when they'd pass it out to another pod, it's like really interesting and like how it allowed them to maintain a lot more phases, especially in I think the second time they used it, they got to like 17 or something
Yeah,
because it
so
was basically like a pre-rush.
right, no, you're spot on. Now, do you remember when we talked about monkeys, bears, and elephants?
Yes,
That's
a
what you
little
just
bit
saw.
vaguely.
So, hi, Katie. Hi, Katie. Um,
Hi.
yeah, so Lenny, basically that was a variation that you just saw England play. Okay, Ariane's with us. Katie Lamont's with us. Katie's with us, Lainey's with us, and Rachel's with us. Okay. Leanne's with us, Lainey's with us. So, Katie, as we're getting underway here, do you have any thoughts on the game you watched?
Um, I thought it was pretty solid.
So, what did you notice about the forward play?
Actually, like,
Emily's here. Checking in. Hi, Katie. Hi, Katie. Nicole's here. Rachel's here. Linda's here. Welcome. Lauren's here. Alexa's here. Amy's here. Emily's here. So 7 o'clock, folks, and I want to honor your time. So just love, you're absolutely right. Just want to honor your time. Just curious, folks, and I want to. I'm just curious, what was everybody's take on the game in terms of forward play? Some folks have said it was solid. Some folks noticed the England attacking patterns. Just curious. We've got open mic. What are people's thoughts about the forward play that they saw during the game?
I noticed that England was pretty clearly working in threes all the time. Like every time they went into contact, the people on each side sucked in and secured that ball. That was really cool. And that they were very good at maintaining possession in contact and getting those couple extra meters. while going down, while fighting with the other team. It's really impressive. Also, that Locke who had that try saving tackle, like, oh my God. She took down this, I don't remember her position, but she was very, very fast. And it speaks to the point that you were making on Tuesday about locks and expecting more dynamic play out of them, and rather than just being workhorses. That was just a huge contribution to the game that she made there.
For sure. Thank you. Anyone else? What were some of the features that you found, whether it was the French scrum, for example, or the way that England played?
From a defensive standpoint, for England, it's pretty much for all their players, like every tackle, there was two people. Like it was always a big hit up and there was someone immediately there, which was good because France had some hard runners and England just shut them down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Defensively. So I was saying positive tackles too defensively. There was one like right in the first like minute that like she went back like 2 yards.
Yeah, positive tackles are important. Stopping the ball, like you know, is a priority. I have a little bit of play here, which I thought might be interesting. I'm just going to X out of this for a second. Okay. And just hopefully you can see that. It's just a little bit of phases of play, just 4 or 5 minutes, just to kind of refresh us. And because we're dealing with the back row tonight, have a look at the play. Choose a number from England or France, and have a look about how they play, and then we'll chat a bit. So let's just watch it for 4 or 5 minutes. We'll come back. So that might have been a little difficult to watch, just because of the time delay. But if you want to mark the time, it was the 23 minutes and 5 seconds to 29:20, something like that. And so I chose that segment of play because there are so many different players involved. And from the back row point of view, which is what we're dealing with tonight, from the back row point of view, what we're dealing with tonight, it's not always clear or evident what the back row is actually trying to do or determined to do. So what we're going to try to do tonight is clarify each of the positions for you. As we've done with the loose head, hooker, tight head, 4 and 5, we're going to define the nuances and some of the differences between the two, between the three players. That's the 6, 7, and 8. 6 is called the blind side because they defend the short side. 7 is referred to as the open side because they play on the larger side of the field. And 8 is always between the locks at the back of the scrum, playing both sides of the scrum when it goes down. The yellow arrows that you can see are ideally, in the scrum, the forwards, the back rows there, 6 and 7, are driving through the spine, not the hamstrings of their props. And one of the technical features for both 6 and 7 is that you have to be able to drive off both shoulders. So you have to be equally balanced when you're doing things. And of course, there's some difficulties and opportunities around that. So like we normally do, we're going to go through. I'll stop regularly for questions. If you've got questions, please just type them in the box like you've been doing great, and then we'll open it up frequently. Okay, so let's crack on here. So reviewing the last session, we did 4 and 5, which we know emotionally the personality of the scrum. We know that 4 is the ball winning side, 5 is the tight head side, and we know that their work rate, their creativity, and their contribution around the field specifically is much greater now and higher demand than it's ever been at any time in the game. And Esther spoke to that a little bit earlier. So we did 4 and 5. Today we're doing 6, 7, and 8. We'll discuss the key factors in the performance monitoring and goal setting around that. So let's get underway. So I think I have bad internet connection because of weather down here. I'm in Carmel, Indiana right now, and the storm's just coming in. So I'm going to hold off showing the video, but I encourage you to have a look at this if you haven't done so already, just to give you a flavor. It's a great video essay. I really like NGJ in terms of how this guy operates with his analysis. I think he is a very steady analyst in this way. So we looked at France versus England for today. Next Tuesday, thank you for the feedback about the link. I'm sorry how that happened for today. USA versus New Zealand is our focus. And the first thing I'd encourage you to do is watch the first 3 minutes of play, particularly for 9 and 10, because you'll notice the difference in kicking. And clearly, the analysis that was done between games by New Zealand led to their first score, and the kinds of forward play and combination play you saw between backs and forwards for England, you'll see in the first 3 minutes of New Zealand versus USA. So just something to look forward to there. Okay. So when we think of the back row, just put a question out to everybody here. Looking at the summary, the heartbeat of the team, breakdown specialists, the fitness requirements, in terms of all-round play, these are, how do you call it? I learned a different term to describe it now. Ratchet players. They can do a little bit of everything quite well and quite powerfully. They destroy the opponent's go forward play. They source possession at the breakdown. They continue play and they support play. A 4 or a 5 can be moved to a 6 or 8. And the reason that a lock can be moved to a 6 is because, with the exception of some of the defensive capabilities, a lock can operate in a very similar way as a 6 without too much coaching. Providing they're physically capable, they can go on. So I'm just going to address a couple of questions here and just lay it open to everybody. Is there anything on this summary list that is surprising to you about 6, 7, and 8? So where I learned the term ratchet was actually from another therapist that I'm training with, and she introduced me to this term to help me understand how to how she operated as a professional in her in her practice and what have you. So it was very good. It was a great word for me to learn. Thank you, Olga. Okay, so I'm taking it that the summary slide is cool with everybody. All right. So let's move on here. So number 6, even though I've put number 7 play in there, number 6 and 7, and you'll see why with the nuances, extremely close. The difference is the access of position of 7 to play versus where 6 is. So 6 is always on the short side, 7 is always on the open side. If we go back to the very first picture that you see there at the top, so you've got 6 on the short side, which you'll notice is where the touch line is. So very short side here. And in this picture, the 14 is straight behind. We probably would not do that if it was this close to the touch line, but there we are. 6 plays the short side, pushes on their left shoulder. 7 plays the open side, pushes on their right shoulder. And so if red ball was being placed where the cursor is, you would have their scrum half 9 on this side, and you would have 7 where 6 is, and 6 versus 7 is. So our open side is always playing the open side. Okay, and so this player 6 always has to come on a loop behind the scrum typically and covering line of defense. That's what adds to their nuance. So, okay, so scroll down here a little bit. Okay, so the positional requirements for a 6. So as you'd expect with the locks, high selective aggression. What we mean by mental flexibility. Hey, love, can you close the door? Sorry.
Mom, you're making so much noise.
Thank you. Okay, so mental flexibility. What we mean by that is because a back row is trying to initiate and respond in quick time, they have to be able to leave something and go to something else. So you've got to have a very short-term memory about what's just happened so you can keep moving to the next thing. And so because of the level of engagements, and you'll see as we go on, as we go on, if you imagine there are 8 phases of play, you would expect your number 7 to be involved in 2/3 of them. So you would expect them to be involved at 5 or 6 of those phases, whereas a 6 you would expect about 50%, which would be 4, and an 8 about the same. And the reason for that is their position, the fitness requirements, which we'll outline, but also the requirements. I keep losing this. I keep losing audio. Whereas a 6, you would expect an 8. Yeah, so whereas the 6 and 8 will be expected to be involved in at least 50% of the phases. So if you're on attack, you would expect your 6 and 8 to be involved in 4 of 8 phases, for example. Okay, and when we say play the moment and up to the second play, it means that they're able to narrow their focus to what they're doing immediately and then shift it quickly. They don't get hung up on anything that's happened. They shift without regard for what's happened. So it's always on task, focus there when the task requires, and then shift on. In terms of team play, what you can see here is that they attend to short side defense. They have more time to line up strong defensive tackles that are positive because they're coming round. They're basically like following play and trying to time their entry into the line so that they meet the ball carrier and are able to attack the ball carrier for a jackal. They often pair up with the centers. They lead and latch, and often in team play, they're a support runner. So you don't expect a 6 to be a ball carrier. You expect a 6 to be a support runner. 8 would be a ball carrier, 12 would be a ball carrier, 13, 4 and 5, but you would expect 6 and 7 particularly to be support runners. So their role is highly effective around the defensive line. They play outside of the post, so the pillar and post are props and locks wherever possible. Obviously, if they find themselves at post or pillar, they will be there. But for what we're structuring towards is a pillar and post, props and locks situation with 6s, 8s, and 7s in the middle of the field there. So they typically pair up with centers. So if you imagine a situation where scrum comes out, it goes to the fly half, 12 takes the ball up strongly, gets beyond the gain line, 7 would be across, 8 would be across, 10 then plays 13, 13 comes back inside to 6. That would be something like that. And if you haven't got that picture, that's okay, that's another session. But that's the kind of flow that you'd expect for a 6. Any questions like so far? So you see here, technically, one of the differences is the ruck and maul proficiency. So the 6, 7, and 8, you look for them along with 12 to be extremely proficient in mauling and rucking because of the type of roles that they have. 13 as well, but 13 typically 13 are a little let's say their primary role is to stop play and create play, not necessarily be destroyers. They contribute, but they have a slightly different contribution in terms of value. So they add the basics, but their added value is creating turnover opportunities, creating opportunities for jackals, like like this. When we go forward, they're much more an attacking player. Okay, so they're a finisher, they're a creator, so it's slightly different. So for us, 2, 6, 8, 7, and 12 are the players we look to be ruck and more proficient. So we look for them for leadership, and of course, everybody else is training to be proficient and do it well because those things happen in a unit. But 6 particularly, 6 is a unit, meaning that they're very physical, very strong. They're not necessarily as quick as 7. They're on a par for speed with 8, but they're very difficult to contend with physically because they're strong upper body. So that means shoulders, back, neck, and core, particularly strong for the role that they have defensively. And you can hear there's a much more there's a stronger emphasis on defense for this player right over every other player on the field because the workload of this player is deliberately structured at set piece, from set piece, scrum, and line out to be utterly destructive. So this is somebody who's got to really enjoy contact and really enjoy messing up the opponent's play. So if you can think of anybody like that, or you are somebody like that, this might be a position for you. And in terms of size, it's less about size and more about strength, power, speed, and technique. This is what's necessary. One of the questions came up, about do you have to be big second row or so on. We are who we are. So in terms of height, weight, speed, what we can ask of ourselves is to be the best version of ourselves. That's it, period. So for our club, what we're interested in is every player training and developing to be the best player they can be and fit in with the team concept. It's not necessarily fitting into every single aspect that the role requires as a 6. It means knowing what the requirements are and developing and training towards those requirements for the team. So how do you measure it? Well, the easy stuff, like we talk about to untrained eyes, these are the line out and scrum situation, where people can see because it's slow and everybody can pick you out. As soon as you're into the third phase, you're really into your team eyes and your coach's eyes. So I mentioned down here at the bottom of obvious to trained eyes, sacrifices only your teammates and coaches can see. What I mean by that is that often the work of the 6 goes unnoticed because it's done so well. And so a good number 6 will contest a ruck so hard that the ruck slows down. And the teammates will appreciate that. Everybody on the field and the coaches will appreciate that. The 6 will create a turnover. They won't be the ones that jackal necessarily. They might be, but they might not be. But what they do is they make a great defensive stop and they create the opportunities for other people. And when maybe they're laying on the ground initially from the tackle and they're trying to get out, the jackal has already been affected by another player. And so your coaches and your teammates will see that, but other people won't. Other people won't know how you got from one place to another and you're in the right place because they won't know how well you read the game. They'll just assume that you got there without understanding how you got there or the decisions that you made. So you'll know that the obvious things, like you can see on the left, these are things that are obvious whenever the ball is dead. So don't think you have to, don't worry about that criticism, okay? Because there's a lot more to 6 than just what happens from the dead ball. So obviously take care of your roles and responsibilities, but when you're setting your goals, think about the actual role requirements for the team, okay? Where you need to be, how you need to be, what the second line defensive line is, and those types of things. And always ask questions if you're unclear about what it is that you're supposed to be doing. In terms of lines of support, one of the things that you will see for 6 is 6 almost has no attacking responsibility. So what that means is they basically run anywhere in support of the ball. And that's really great because they're completely free. So where the ball is, you would expect to see 6 on their way to support. That's it. And if you stop a camera frame and you see 6 in the frame heading towards support, that's where they should be. Okay, they're not necessarily hanging out onto the wing or in the middle of the centers. That's maybe an 8 or a 7, particularly an 8. But the 6 is like supporting. They're manic. They're the manic support player. So let's just take a pause there. Okay, what questions do they have about 6?
Not a question, but a comment. Something I've noticed watching a lot of rugby. A good number 6 makes the rest of your back row look good. So the 7 tends to like get all the glory right in the back row. They're the one everyone wants to be, but the 7, the things that the 7 do would never be possible without the 6 doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I think if you have a team that has a 7 that's really standing out, you have to consider the 6.
Olga, just to go off of what you said, I thought in the France-England game, the 6 on the France team was exactly what you said, like just the workhorse creating like opportunities, and then the 7 was always hanging out on the outside, making line breaks.
That's typical. That's exactly what we do.
I meant like the 6 created the opportunity for the 7 to advance on the outside.
Yeah, that's a great
Because
catch.
they're working. It allows your 7 and 8 to work more out in the loose and whatever it is that 7s and 8s do in the loose.
Other comments or feedback? Okay, so moving to 7. So 7 is like on the open side of the field. So quite similar in the mental requirements. One of the differences is led to contest possession. So this is whereas the 6 has to enjoy and love the physical opportunities that the game gives them in terms of tackling, getting up, running in support, clearing rucks, and being generally a nuisance to the opposition. 7 has a specific mental focus, which is to contest possession. It means that they're ready, willing, and capable of always terrorizing the opposition ball carrier. So this person has to have incredible tenacity and instinct for the hunt. And often you'll find these players on the bottom of rucks in second phase, fourth phase, or sixth phase if they're contesting possession, which for us they should be. And if they've been told to go a little bit wider and be a support runner, you'd expect them to be a support runner off the center or to be a strike runner just a little bit wider of 12. So running between the centers or running just outside 13. You'll also see them as a blocker or a screen player running through. But what's very particular about them is the idea of being led to contest possession. They have to be hungry for that contest. So a tackle for a 7 would be a ball and all tackle, where they catch a player in possession, tackle and jackal at the same time, or tackle and create a jackal, and then they're up again. So these are marauders, and they terrorize opposition backlines. Their vision, so you can see here, is very consistent with 6, except with the position. They always have access to follow the ball. So they're typically tracking inside the ball, which means that if they check off 9,
You don't want to know the update I have for you.
I don't, because I've lost audio again.
I
So my audio is back on. So 7 checks off 9 to make sure that they don't come up the short side or check off a back row play. As they go with the ball, they're typically scraping inside the line of the ball and attempting to make contact when the centers or the fly half have the ball. So they kind of make a second or third player tackle. And then if the opponent has possession and they can't stop the resourcing of the ball at the second or third phase, then they start to get a little bit further out into open play. So typically you find the second and fourth phase will be where 7 will be contesting, maybe into the 6th phase, but typically it's early in the phase count that you see 7 at their most difficult defensively. As you can see, they pair up with the centers and they live for the breakdown. So wherever the ball is broken down in the on the defensive side of things, you're expecting 7 to be contesting for the ball at least every other ruck. So their physical capability is superior in the context of a team. So you're always looking for your 7s to be the most well-conditioned players on the field, so that they obviously can move from phase to phase. And then when there's a turnover, let's imagine they've just been at a ruck, there's a turnover, there's a couple of hit-ups, maybe 3 or 4 hit-ups. They've managed to gather their energy enough that then they can get involved in the play. So the physical part you see here, that they have to be able to push off both shoulders. They've got to have good balance, good acceleration. They're an all-round player. So as the back row goes, 6 and 7 go, 8 go as well. So if 6 makes 7 and 8 look good, 7 makes the team go better because they create turnover opportunities and they generally disrupt. Technically, whereas you don't expect 6 to be a fantastic runner or passer of the ball, with 7, these days you're expecting your 7s to be a little bit of a ball player and a little bit of a runner as well. And that's a development. Typically 6 and 7 were considered, up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, essentially fetching carriers. So they would do what would be like described, I guess, as the hard work, not the hard yards. They do the hard work of creating turnovers, of creating disruption in and around the ruck. They would tidy up the line out. They would tidy up the scrums with their feet. They would basically hunt the ball down. Now, the 7 in particular is expected to be able to link up play, continue play, be able to run in support of forwards and backs, and you're expecting them to play probably the highest level for like 65 to 70 minutes before you'd even consider substituting them because they've blown their gas out. So physically, they're on a par with a hooker. So you'd expect a 2 and a 7 to be at the highest levels of fitness, with 6 and 8 in the team. Some things that are similar to 6. So it's the obvious things that everybody can see, which is line out, scrum play, first and second phase attack and defense. When we get to the line outs and scrums for us, unlike some teams, we're going to use back row plays with 6, 7, and 8 setting up play to launch from. So we're going to source possession, play with 7 and 8. So they're going to be technical players. Their ruck and maul skills will be shown up when our line out unit is winning ball. 6 and 7, their jobs are typically unseen when they come in and support, and we'll have different roles according to what we're going for there as well. So the things that untrained eyes don't often see are these things, like the subunit and pairs connection. So a subunit connection in defense would be 7, 10, 12, and 8. That's an inside subunit defense off first phase in open play. people that are watching but don't know what they're looking at might not put together that 7 is leading the defense, supported by 8 on the inside and 10 and 12 on the outside. So those are the types of things that when you're thinking about setting your goals, until we actually get into training and we get some minutes under our belt, if you will, together, it will be difficult to assess your ability because those things have to be worked on. Racking technique, mauling technique, jackal technique, all of that can be developed in training. You can set your goals according to where you're at in training. And something that came up today, one of the questions was, how do we set our goals? So all goals for me are self-referenced. I don't recommend setting your goals according towards what somebody else says. So if you decide that you're at a 5, then the next level would be a 6. And so the question would be, if your challenge is +1 on a scale of 10, what have you got to do to get from a 5 to a 6 for a particular skill, technique, or decision-making piece? So I just want to pause there. What questions do you have about the 7?
It might not come out too clear, but when you're looking at a player and you know that they're going to be a flanker, or you want them to be a flanker, would you look more at like the fitness level to decide whether they would be 6 or 7, or is it more of a like mentality thing?
Brilliant question. So I think that's a brilliant question because it kind of gets to the immediate things of the position. So first off, if somebody is not physically capable of playing 6 and 7, I wouldn't look at them in that role, to be quite honest, because they're too exposed. If the 6 and 7 are weak physically, and I don't mean that they're weak players, but I'm just saying if they're not fit, the whole team goes badly because the scrums and lineouts become very difficult to attack from or defend from. So let's just stay with the attack. If physically you're 7, and if your 7 can't get to 4 breakdowns without breaking down physically, it's difficult for your team to play wide because typically the 7 supports on the inside and outside depending on what's being called. And if your 7 can't get there, your 8 and 6 can't get there. So it means that your attack narrows. If your 6 can't cover inside the support plate on the second and third phase at least, then it also puts pressure on your tight attack. So basically, your 6 and 7 offer the extra numbers where you want to attack in your backline. So if they're not physically capable of getting out and sustaining effort, it's difficult for the backs actually to go forward because you have to decide at that point if the 6 and 7 are not on your tight attack. So basically, you want to attack of getting out. So my audio is coming in and out, folks. So if your 6 and 7 can't get out, it means the way that your backline calls their plays is determined by the amount of support they're going to get. So it means that when you're going from a scrum or a line out, typically your backs have to decide to be extremely vertical and play between each other because they can't necessarily rely on support from 6 or 7. So just in attack, if we just take those principles of attack for the back line without 6 and 7, yeah, physically this is not going to work. Defensively, you just can't have a 7 that can't make the second breakdown and then the fourth breakdown. That's not going to work. And if 6 doesn't have the conditioning to make a tackle, get up from a tackle, make another tackle, and then join the defensive line, and do that, 20 or 30 times a game, it isn't going to work. So physically, 6 and 7 have to be on par. They have to be well conditioned. Not perfect, they have to be well conditioned. So you've got the physical part, then you've got the technical part. So the technical part is, are they effective tacklers? It doesn't mean they have to make massive hits. It doesn't mean that they have to destroy players. It means they have to be able to stop the ball and contest it in a jackal. They have to be able to stop the ball in a standing tackle, okay, stand-up tackle, and then hold the maul. So there's ways of doing that technically. When ball is being recycled, they're the players that you look for to have excellent rucking technique, because they're there first, typically, from set piece. And in loose play, you'd expect to see them have the best jackal technique along with the hooker and the 12 on the team. So you look for it physically, then you look for it technically. The other parts, like the attacking lines of run, again, if you took a picture and you saw 6 coming from the inside, 7 supporting kind of from the outside a little bit, that would be ideal. What we don't want to do with 6 and 7 is prescribe too much attacking runs unless it's a set play that's being called, in which case obviously they'll have a line of run. But in terms of support, we want to give them maximum amount of freedom and opportunity to support play according to where the point of the attack is. So to your question, yes, start with the physical and then look at and evaluate the technical skills. The decision-making skills can come, but as a way of understanding what your role is, if you're a fit unit, you like the physical, and you're prepared to contest in different parts of the game at the breakdown and destroying the attack, this is a great place to start.
Okay, I think that answered my question too about kind of prescribing versus like in open play, kind of what to expect, with the flankers and with support, like.
Yeah, so for example,
Yeah, running off like first and second phase. Okay, I was gonna say they answered, I think, part of my question, but in terms of like free play, you say like attack and defense, in terms of like what the 6 and 7 are supposed to do, right? Given what happens in the first phase, that'll kind of dictate like where we're attacking or who, what bodies we have, right, to move into the space. And I think sometimes we're tempted to like take our assignment and like do only that. So I think you kind of express it that like, this is kind of more of a guideline, right? It's like a guideline, like what you see really high level, and then you kind of play from there.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. So the guideline, here's a guideline that would sort of like X everything. So let's imagine that back play's been called and 7, 12, and 13 are now in the contact phase, and it's been slowed down, and they're doing a good job of disrupting our play. If the ball isn't fast, then what we would want to do is reset to elephants. So we'd expect 3 forwards to have seen that, 1 to put their hand up, 2 to join into a 3 and bang it up. Oh, fuck's sake. Fast, then what we would expect 3 to join into a 3. So join into a 3 and then hit it up strongly to get us go forward. Then it's like elephant, then it's a monkey, which is the pick, and then it's the bear, and then based off that pace of play, then back to the 10 to be reading the pace of play. It's like, all right, here's where we're going, or how we decide it from there. But the basic guideline is if the ruck is slow and we're being challenged, then we set up with an elephant and we get rolling with go forward. So somebody mentioned how England played with 3s. If you've been watching the games that I've been sending you from the English Premier League, the way England play, you can see standardized across the whole of the Women's Professional League in England. So it's like 3s, 3s, 3s. If you watch Wasps, they do everything, literally everything in 3s. It's one of the reasons they're successful, but it's also one of the reasons that they're having difficulty beating Harlequins and Saracens for the championships is because they're super predictable. So there's the script, there's what happens, and then there's the call off when we go elephants because things are slow. So whenever it goes slow, it asks us to change the pace, and that means that everybody's going to be understanding at one time what's going on, because we can't be telling each other what to do during the game. You have to read that the ruck is slow, and that there needs to be pace. As that pace is being put on, 10 and 12 are surveying the space, maybe 9 surveying the space, and decisions are being made this way. So there's structure that allows for improvisation, that allows for resetting as well. Is that clear, Stan?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
So question here, like another question about prescribed roles for 6, 7, and 8, specifically about defensive roles. Is it always the 8 who should be dropping for kick returns, supporting the back 3, and how and when should this be communicated? Yeah, good question. So no, it shouldn't be 8 because it shouldn't always be 8 because 8 might not normally be there. Typically, it depends like what works off your first and second phase defense. So, for example, if we play a 13 and 2, what that means is that 13 players will be in the line and there'll only be 2 backs. If there are only 2 backs, what we would expect to happen oh, okay, so back on. So if we had a 13 and 2, which means 13 up front and 2 behind, the kick is put in, then what we would expect is the back to receive it and either send it back down the field onto grass or for a pass and counter attack with the 2. Is to say that you'd have a player dropping into the dropping out. Okay. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, thanks. So if you got a 13 and 2 and everybody's switched on, if play is slow and we forced a kick, we wouldn't expect players to be dropping out of the defensive line. We still want maximum pressure. What we're relying on is our 2 backs, so our 15, either our 15 and 11 or our 15 and 14, because we're playing a 13 and 2. It's going to be that combination if we're playing a 13 and 2. We'd expect them to receive the ball. It might be one pass, and then we send it back downtown. That's a kick downfield if we send it downtown. Or it goes to the wing, back to the fullback, and she sends it downtown with a different angle. So for me, the idea of like prescribing a defensive role of 6, 7, or 8, always dropping out the line, means that we're dropping players back from pressure. I would prefer that we receive the ball, send it downtown, and get re-established holding our territory. Because if we drop players out of the line, they're typically more static and stationary. When the ball goes over, you expect players to retreat anyway. And I'm hoping that our back three, 11, 15, and 14 will be able to catch a ball in the air and will be able to hold their position if they get caught in contact for 3 to 5 seconds. If it's a clean take, then it's just received and then straight back down the field onto the grass. This would take away the need to drop players into the defensive line. Does that answer your question? So having said all that, 2 players that do normally drop back that you see when they're reading the game, and this is not prescribed, this is just them reading. If you can picture the game going from left to right, and the scrum half sees that the player is going down the line, and they're not going to be able to follow that phase. But as they see the ball going towards the touchline, and they notice one of the opponent's team's kickers preparing, it's quite often that 9 or 10 will communicate with each other that they're going to drop down. And that just adds a layer of security, but that's not prescribed. That's players playing heads up where they say, okay, I'm not going to meet that. They'll check left or they'll check right, looking at the spacing, and then they'll just drop in behind to provide a third player. What they've already decided is that they're not going to make the next phase, and that of the 13 players in the line, there's a pillar and post in the middle that can satisfy it. They'll start to drop to accommodate the kick. Maybe they'll drop, instead of dropping 40 yards, they'll maybe drop 20 and play a half position. As they see the play unfold, then they'll push back up towards the line. But you'd expect 9 and 10 to make that call. It seems kind of counterintuitive with a 13 and 2 or even a 12 and 3 defense that you drop your back row into the back line. It was interesting in the WPL last year, Atlanta, when they played us, they played North Shore, they played with 3 back almost the entire game, and they were challenging 12 versus 3, always expecting the kick, which never came. So that was interesting. So they had been told to expect the kick because they didn't change their tactics the entire game, and even when time was running down, they didn't change anyway, which they're inviting the run instead of the kick. Which is kind of interesting. Okay, so number 8. Rock on. So number 8's a little bit of a, how do you say? Let's just say a performer. So 8 connects the scrum to the backs. Mentally, think of it like this: if the hooker is the leader of the scrum, the locks are the personality, and the back row is the heartbeat, then the 8 is the talisman. And the talisman is the person that can do a little bit of everything, literally has the never say die attitude, ever, and is a player typically that all players can rally around because emotionally they're stable enough to accept the responsibilities that come with the exposure that their position has. So what we mean by exposure is that they're at the back of the scrum. Technically, they've got to be able to get the ball to their right foot to allow the scrum half to play it. So they've got to control the ball winning unit. They've got to communicate with 9. They have to be quick enough to get down to their right foot, pick it up and accelerate to attack the channel or to do a back row move. They are in combination always with the back row, with the 9, often with the 10, 12, and 13 in attack. Defensively, they're typically leading behind the 7. So this player is on show the whole time. This player There's nowhere on the field this player can hide. So this is someone who's comfortable shouldering the responsibility and accountability that comes with that kind of focus from both teams. So you typically find these folks, in terms of their personality, range, but you typically always find an A-type personality with an abundance of emotional energy. It doesn't mean they're hyper. It just means there's an abundance of emotional energy in them, and that they're able always to be up for the contest, but they're not too high and not too low. Whereas 7 needs that kind of abundance of tenacity, almost to the edge of aggression, and 6 needs that love of the contact and love of the contest. 8 has to be able to play both ways. They need to be creative going forward, steady going backwards. They need to have all-round skills, including kicking skills, which we'll talk about a bit. As you can see here, they're the ultimate team player. And what we mean by that is just that because they're literally the bridge between the forwards and the backs, they have to have an all-around game. And I can't remember, I think it was Esther the other night. The thing about playing rugby, no one player has all the skills necessary. And so the ultimate team player is just somebody who keeps working on their skills. They can do a little bit of everything quite well. And so think about them as this ratchet player. They can do a lot. Some things they can do better than others, but their all-around contribution can be relied on. So when this player mentally is on their day, with 6 being on their day and 7 being on their day, the type 5 can do their jobs in secure knowledge that literally their back row have their backs, and the front row and the locks don't have to overwork. And then what it means for 12 and 13, if they know 8 is always going to be coming through, supporting them, or even taking the ball off a set play. So, for example, a double switch, what that you could think about would be the scrum is on the left, the ball comes left to right, it goes 9, 10, 12, and 12 hits 8 coming through, with 15 and 14 joining from the outside, and then 7 coming from the inside. And so you're putting 5 players led by the 8 onto the outside center's channel. And so you overwhelm the outside center channel with 8 hard runner, and then an abundance of support to then go on and attack to the right or come back and attack the left. So you've got that kind of set play where you can bring the 8 in, no problem. Let's get in here a bit. Physically, it's the work volume. So whereas 7, is like, if you think about explosiveness and intensity, okay, and tenacity, always being up for the fight at the breakdown. 8's work is about volume. So sometimes it'll be really intense, but it's about a high level of consistency in all areas of the game. So a little bit of the jackal, a little bit of line out play, rucking, mauling. It's the total volume of the game contribution that 8 has. Okay, so whereas like we'd expect them, if they're handling the ball, we'd expect them to be at least as good as an inside center. If they're kicking the ball, we'd expect them to be at least as good as an inside center. If they're mauling and rucking, we'd expect them to be at least as good as a 6 and as good as the front row. So that you would expect to see this player have a stable performance across the team. Not necessarily strong enough to be a wing or a center, but on a par with them with some technical skills. Same with the front row. So this is an all-action player that has to have a high degree of individual technical ability. So obviously, if you're in this position or you're playing in the back row or number 8, your ability to learn is really important. And rapid technical development is very important as well, because so much is demanded of you to do well. You can see here creative handling. So this player, along with locks, you'd expect to see one-handed passing, one-handed offloads, creative handling, because their goal is to be a continuity player, a link-up player, and to keep the ball moving. So again, lots of ways to be expressive here. Goal setting for this, it's very similar to 7 and 8. Because of the nature of the position, lots of people can see it. Okay, what a lot of people won't see is how you read the game and how you're effective around the field. So they'll see discrete things. So, for example, if the 8 is a kicker and they notice that 10 has been sucked in, and if 12 goes in, they need to drop into 12's position. People that know the game will know why they've done that. Or if two kickers, if it's the 15 and 10, are not available, 8 makes themselves available as a kicker. There are things of that nature where 8 we encourage 8 to have that sort of mindset to create play and continue play. So when you're setting your goals for this position, is that there's the obvious stuff that you have to do, and then this obvious to the trained eyes would be like subunit and pairs connection. So for example, I mentioned inside defense from a scrum, which would be like 8, 10, 7, and 12, and maybe 9 as well. Wide defense, that would be 12, 13, 7, 8, 14. So those are just two areas. If we're thinking on the attacking side, it might be a scrum play where 8 picks deliberately takes out their 7 and 8 with the line of run. It's a hit and spin, offload to 7, who takes off and hits their 10, with our 10 and our 12 joining at the same time. So those are unit plays there. If the scrum is coming in, ball's fed in, then the 8 is making sure that the lock's feet are open. When the ball comes back to the number 8's left foot, that it's moved from left to right and it's on the back right foot of the 8, so that the scrum half can pick it up. And of course, all of that is determined by the quality of the processes and systems in front that have gone into the scrum. If that's working, then the 8's role is very specific there. So there's lots of subunits and pairs connections that come up with the 8. They team up with lots of different players differently throughout the game. All right, so questions, comments? AJ, Al, do you have anything? Okay.
Hello? Wait, does it work now? Sorry,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how to get it to work.
We can hear you.
But
Go ahead.
I guess when I was listening to this, to me the thing that sticks out was when you're talking about like relationships and talking, and I think that the best way for the 8 to function is they have to be able to communicate while thinking of where they're needed and what they're going to do next. Because I know a lot of the successful like 8 things I've seen have been constant like head up, like, oh well, I could fill in here, or I can help here, or being able to be versatile and be open to being versatile and talking to the right people to make that happen.
Yeah, so
can
you say more about what you mean by the right people?
Sorry, I'm like taking our runs. I guess when I mean the right people, I mean like if it's on, say we're like on a scrum, are you communicating with, say, like the 9 and the 10 versus if you're an open player, you're talking to the 12 and the 10, or just in general, the people around you. I don't know if that makes sense. In my brain, it makes sense.
Yeah, so I think this goes back.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
I think that's a good comment, and it also goes back to, it's a good comment because it's very game realistic now, but it also goes back to what Stan was saying there a little bit earlier, which is, being alive in the moment to what's in front of you, and being with the people around you in a way that's effective.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That was a nice way of putting what I had in my brain.
Yeah, that's good, and it's great to see you back, and congratulations on your recovery.
Oh, thanks. I feel much better now. We'll see. Too bad we're in this lull now, but it's okay. It'll be a great comeback.
Even better. Just looking down some names. Katie, Lauren, do you have anything? Mac, Nicole?
Trout and I were talking about just that, like, so on North Shore, we've never had an 8-man that can kick, but it's also something that we've never asked an 8-man to do or even presented it. So, like, same as what Jude said with the locks, that, like, just asking people to even attempt different things. So that was our big takeaway from some of the 8-man things.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. I mean, one of the things I hope that we can do together is learn just how big everybody's game can be, and that there's no closed doors to personal growth or opportunity playing rugby. Nicole, how about you?
Linda, you have to play a couple of games so that we can see if you can do it.
Yeah.
This means you can't leave.
Or she has to come back in the fall.
Yeah. That's right, Linda.
I also like one thing that stuck with me too about the 8 is like how it really connects, or the player really connects, like the scrum and the backs, especially in set piece, but I guess connects in all forms of play too, because that, like, knowing how, like, the scrum's going, right? That decision making, I guess, is with the whole pack, but knowing and, like, having that relationship and trusting and making sure the other players trust them to kind of, like, all work together and really, like, 8 as one, I think is another thing I see, like, in a good 8.
Yeah, so imagine a situation where scrum is on the left and you call a C channel attack, okay? And the 8 and 9 have decided this is going to be a back row play. So what that would mean is, let's say, for example, it would be an 8 pick straight up the side of the scrum, turning and offloading to 6, coming round with a curling ruck into their fly half space. So they would need to communicate with you in order for your backline to time their runs according to the speed of the ruck. And so you'd be playing against hopefully a defense in disarray, and their ability to communicate that, execute that, and then for your backline to have fewer numbers to play against in defense, that would be a good thing. So that's also how relationships can shape out. So you're not just playing for the phase you're in, but you're playing for the third phase, or you're playing for the second and third phase ahead. And 8 can make that, 8 and 9 and 10 can make that decision on the field, no problem. Nicole, Mac, Katie, Jenna Lee, any questions, comments?
I don't have any like questions, but like comment wise, like particularly for everyone. Like I feel like a lot of us have kind of been put in like rugby boxes over the years, or you're new to the sport and you don't really know what you're doing yet. Like I would hope that whether you want to say it right now, if you're like, why the hell am I not doing this position? Because I've just learned that I am perfect for X, Y, and Z. So like if anyone feels like they want to try one of these, like you can speak up now or talk to JCL or myself. Like we can work to develop that and help you feel like strong in whatever way you want to. So because I think we're all learning a lot right now.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Nicole. And something I wanted to encourage all of you to think about is having 2 or 3 positions in your mind. So what do I mean by that? Is that, okay, let's imagine that we're fortunate enough to have a club side of 35 players. Well, it's unlikely that all 35 will ever be available all of the time for lots of different reasons. And our opposition changes as well, so it means we have to do different things, eh? So there's your preferred position, the one that you're like, yeah, that's me. I'm dead on for that. And we talked about this with the props because some of our players prefer to prop left and right, meaning left being loose head and right being tight head. And some of our folks prefer to play 12 and 13 or 11 versus 14 in the wings, and that's normal. But think about, okay, how can I contribute my skills through my preferences? So if your preference is to play outside center, could you at a pinch move from 13 to 7? Because you've got the pace, you've got the capability physically to progress play. Maybe that would be a fit, and then you might go, can I do 15, 7, 6? Sorry, 13, 7, 6. Or could I go from 15 to 13 to 14 to 11 or 10? Can I go from 9 to 2, for example, or 9 to 10? And so it's having a preference in mind for what you're really strong at, because we always want to play to your strengths, your ultimate strengths. But then if I need to contribute to the team in my secondary position, what is my secondary position that I can live with? And then what's my oh shit position? Like the team really needs me. What can I do safely and effectively at a minimum standard? So an example of that, and I'll just give it from my own experience. The example was having a preference for playing 15, then being moved to 12, then being moved to 6, and then being moved to 8. And so that was my union career. And in my league career, I was always in the back row. So that was either a lock or a 13, which is the loose forward. And so what I learned in my own career was to understand what my preferences were, and then understand how I could add skill to my preferences so that I could be always making a contribution. And one of the ways that I encourage you to also to think about this is that if you have a big bag of tools, it always makes it more likely that you're going to get more playing time. And that's because you have an ability to make lots of contributions to your teammates. It also means that when players are available or not available, as the case may be, that you're able to contribute to the team and get something better maybe out of your rugby experience than if you just kind of like were in this box. So I encourage you to get out of the box, don't live in the box. In fact, just pack the boxes away and just be yourself. Great. So if you want to be a scrum half, then we can totally get after that. We're very excited to see that. So
I would say that additionally, along with like being open to playing multiple positions, which I'm by myself doing a lot of nowadays, happily. Part of that means like having knowing the game a little bit more than just what it is that your preferred position is. Which is really great that we're going through all these positions, because it might mean that, through conversations, you find yourself in a position that you never considered for yourself. But you're more likely to adapt, right? If you have a better understanding of like, what does the scrum half do outside of just pass, or what does the 8 do outside of just, pick off the base of the scrum. So I would encourage everybody to, really dive into other roles and really understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And just be open to it. It's so much fun. So much fun.
Hello?
But JCL, while you're here, 6, 7, 8, that's 3 positions.
I was gonna jump on board with what Olga said, because in the years I've played almost every position at this point, and it does also brighten your eyes to maybe being able to play what you want to play better. So it's not always like, oh, now I'm out here doing this. Well, use it to your advantage and help learn multiple angles of the field, because it's going to make you stronger and then wherever you find yourself. So it's not like you can have a preference, but it is good to be open and be excited and try to learn that position or wherever you end up the best you can, because it's going to make you stronger overall.
And it's going to make you stronger in your preferred positions as well, too. So if I love playing 7, which I love playing 7, and, I find myself playing 6 or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, which has happened. Having played 8, I know what I want in my 7 or 8 or in my 7 or 6s. So maybe when I switch back to these other positions, you can play the positions better because you know what you want from those other positions. So bring that to the table too. Bring your wants to that position. Be like, I wish A carried the ball more. So when you get into A, carry the ball more, things like that.
Yeah, well said. Okay, Skips, open floor for you.
JCL, you mentioned last time that there was another game you wanted us to watch for next week. Can you tell us what to look for in that game?
So I think so many of you have already watched the New Zealand USA game, maybe because of the link. The link faux pas. Yes, we have. Excellent. Watch that game. I mentioned at the top, if you just start off with the first 3.5 minutes, USA versus New Zealand, Rugby World Cup semi-final 2017. Just type that into YouTube, Women's Rugby World Cup 2017, USA New Zealand. If you watch even the first 4 minutes and you watch the play from 9 and 10 on the USA team and the New Zealand team, and then you look at the depth of running and the interchange between 9 and 10 and 9 and the runners, that'll set you up for next week's conversation. You'll also notice the very first try that that the US give up comes from a kick that was anticipated, and the right wing had already dropped into position to receive the kick. And so one of the things that you I don't know if you might have thought about this, but one of the things that you're watching is the analysis that the New Zealand team have done of the USA team, and vice versa. So when you think, oh, that player is well positioned, at the level that you're watching, they will have had a video analyst go back, code the USA attack, and what that will show is the tendencies. And typically the USA 10 is a right-footed kicker, not a left-footed kicker. meaning that there's likely to be more errors on the left foot than the right foot. And so they probably would have prepared for that. So as you're watching the game, observe the consistency of both teams. And I think a comment was made to me earlier is that France and England cancel each other out. Well, one of the ways that that's done at the top level is that the teams will be coded sometimes as far back as 20 or 30 games. So there'll be 20 or 30 games for some teams of coded analytics, and what that will be able to show you are the players' tendencies. So if it seems like, oh, these teams know exactly what's going on, it's because they do. And so for the semi-finals, the lineups will be different. So, for example, the game that we saw with France and England, the lineups might be slightly different because of injury, but they will have had 96 hours to do an analysis of their opponent, and then that analysis will have been produced probably the night of match 3. So once of match day 3 that they knew that were into the semi-finals, the analysis would have been done that day. It probably would be in the head coach's hands by 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then the first practice for the first day would be organized then. So when you see teams that are very equal or teams that seem to anticipate, that's not by mistake. That's just professional preparation that they've done. And it helps in 3 ways. The first is that you're able to prepare specifically for the opponent you're going to play. Secondly, it helps you recover because you don't have to overwork yourself because you know what you just need to work on. So the sessions are typically shorter and more precise. And 3, in terms of your individual roles and responsibilities, that level of analysis allows you just to take care of yourself and your subunits within the broader team environment. So I think it's a great game, just like this France-England game was, to introduce you to, let's just say, a nice way of thinking about where we could get to. As a unit, Chicago United, we're only a few steps away from being able to do some of the things that the women's professional clubs do in England. So keep that in mind, that even what we're doing by coming together like this, understanding roles and responsibilities, checking in, we're taking small incremental steps, moving towards a much brighter and better future on the field and off the field. Thank you, Rachel. I hadn't put that in my analysis, but I'll look for it in the future.
I wrote very in-depth notes. That was a start point. All right, we have a very important announcement looking forward. As you may or may not know, JCL is a professor, and he is having to start teaching again on Tuesday and Thursday nights, which is great for him and his students, but means it interferes with our practice time. So we as a leadership team have decided that the best thing for the team would be to move practices to Monday, Wednesday, so we can continue to lead them. Which means instead of Tuesday, Thursday next week, we'll be doing Monday, Wednesday, 7 to 9, and Monday, Wednesday into the future. You know, we thought about the pros and cons of different options we have here, and we decided that the benefit to having JCL-led sessions would be, you know, more beneficial than any cons we could think of. And if you have some super important plans on Tuesday or on Monday, Wednesday that would interfere, you know, this probably doesn't apply to most of us, but if you do, the videos will still be accessible afterwards, so you can view them on your own time. But we do still expect you to be here if at all possible, and let us know if you cannot be here. Any questions or comments about that? Okay. I have one more very important announcement, but I want to pass it to Fish, just in case you have anything to say, Fish.
Just like prime your anticipation. There's like really cool things that are living inside my brain that haven't come out yet. It's gonna be really fun when they come out, so get excited. That's it.
No, you get excited.
I cannot express how excited I am to know what's in your brainfish. The last thing that we should do, in case you don't know, we have a birthday in the house or in her house. It's Jenna Lee's birthday.
Yay.
So we're gonna sing to her.
Mute yourself.
So no, don't mute yourself. Turn your volume on, but then turn your microphone on, but turn your volume all the way down so you can't hear yourself. And I will attempt to conduct us. Are we ready?
Oh man.
La 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 la.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy Happy birthday, Jenna Lee. Not your birthday.
It's not Aries yet. It is Aries time. Aries checking in. Aries season checking in.
Oh god.
Aries only.
Announcement. If anybody wants beer from Pollyanna, let me know. Jib Jab is